organizations in the Wiccan religion, and there are people who are practicing the Wiccan religion. I'll tell you right now, in my life right now, I know more Wiccan people who are involved in Wicca. I know more witches than I have ever known in my entire life. I know them. And you would never know them at work. You would never look at them and say, oh, they're a witch. Well, some you might look at and say they're a witch, but not that kind of witch. But you understand what I mean, right? But I mean actual witches that practice the pagan religion. They're out there and they're all over the place. Chances are you probably work with one somewhere. Here is a lady by the name of Kendra Vaughn. She is a high priest of the Church of Satan in Massachusetts. The next one there is Deborah Gray. She is known as America's Witch. She is the leader in the American Wiccan movement. And the guy down there, that is Peter Gilmore, Peter Gilmore, and he is known as the High Grand Master priest of the Satanic Church here in America as well. Now take a look at these faces. The only reason I bring these faces up is because, you know, you take off some of this clothing that they're wearing, but I mean, even look at Deborah Gray up in the corner there. I mean, she looks like a nice young lady. I mean, she looks like your neighbor. She looks like somebody you might want to have a cup of coffee with, or, you know, something like that. You take off this stuff, and they go to work, and they are normal people. You would never know them. But yet they're there, and they're practicing this religion, and this religion is one of the fastest growing religions in America today, and it is one of the most powerful religions that are out there. Now think about this for a minute. You say, I'm totally disconnected from this. This doesn't affect me at all. Again, I guarantee you that as you go to work, you probably work with somebody who's involved with the Wiccan religion, or work with a witch. You just don't know it, okay? I've already worked with 2 Druid priests already in my career. And I'll tell you what, I had some very, very crazy experiences with them. Let me show you how close to home this is. In the 1980s, 1990s, there were multiple allegations of sexual abuse of children or non-consenting adults in the context of satanic rituals. Let me read for you one case here. In one case that took place in Jordan, Minnesota, when children made allegations of manufacturing child pornography, ritualistic animal sacrifices, coprophagia, urophagia, and infanticide. I don't even want to tell you what those things are, and please, I do not suggest that you look up what they are either. At which point the Federal Bureau of Investigation was alerted. 24 adults were arrested and charged with acts of sexual abuse, child pornography, and other crimes related to satanic ritual abuse. Look at the date on that there. I think it's 2007. Isn't that what it says? Yeah. I can't see because of the plant. Okay? 2007. Folks, that is just 4 years ago. Amen. This took place in Jordan, Minnesota. Do you know how far Jordan is from here? About 45, 50 minutes from this very place. You have 24 people being arrested. But you know what? You don't hear about it. Let me tell you a story that I have. Me and my producer, Ross Brendel, for the Word of Truth radio program, we have been working really hard to expose a lot of this occult stuff on the radio show. One of our struggles is that we find it so hard to get any information on this stuff. And I'm telling you, we find it so hard to get information from law enforcement agencies. Amen. I'll tell you this right now. We have literally called the FBI in Minnesota. Okay, the Midwest office branch of the FBI located in Minneapolis. We have called them numerous times and said to them, we need information on occult activity in Minnesota. Can you please have somebody come on the air, or can we interview somebody in private about the occult activity that's going on here in Minnesota? You know what their response to us is? 3 times now. You know what their response is? There is no occult activity in Minnesota. That's what they said to it. There is no occult. No, and I even got a little upset with them one day, and I said, you mean to tell me that in the entire state of Minnesota, there is not one case, one thing, one mention, one allegation, nothing of occult activity in Minnesota? You know what his response was? No. And I asked him about this in Jordan, Minnesota in 2007. You know what he said? He said, I think this conversation's over. Why in the world would they be wanting to protect this kind of stuff? I talked to Bill Schneblin once. He's a regular on the program. We'll reference him here later on in this presentation. And he said, Pastor Brandon, he said, you know why they don't want, and this is going to get a little far out there, so I hope you're ready for this. He said, you know why they don't want to expose this stuff? Because when, as Bill Schneblin, if you know anything about his ministry, he used to be a high priest in the Church of Satan. And now he's a born-again Christian. And we're actually going to have him come here and present his work at some point here. But anyway, he said, you know why? Because when I was in the Church of Satan, we would get messages from spirits that would tell us things that those officers were involved in. And we would bribe them with that information. And he said every time when we get a message like that from, demons or whatever the case is, supernaturally get a message like that, he said we knew it was true and we would contact them and say, don't you say anything or we will expose you. And he said we had messages coming back that some of these officers were involved in child pornography. Some of them were having affairs on their wives. These kinds of things, these deep, dark secrets that some people have, even in the Federal Bureau of Investigation and even in the local sheriff's office. And so he said these people are extremely afraid because he said, I know that there are the Satanists in your area who have contacted some of these officers and said, keep your mouth shut or we will expose you. We know what you're into. Whether it's drugs or whether it's bribery or whether they're skimming off the top or whatever the case is, these satanic priests would end up knowing about it. And it's all done supernaturally. So there is this hidden activity here. How many have ever heard of this event that happened in 2007? Anybody? Okay, some of you have. All right, and maybe you heard it from this presentation before. I don't know. But very, very few people know about it, and very few people know about the occult activity that goes on here in Minnesota. I hope you understand that Minneapolis, Minnesota is one of the hotbeds for occult activity in the entire nation, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Okay? Moving on. Wicked and Satanism. Remember who Samhain is before we go any further, okay? Remember, he is the devil in disguise. We showed you that. And the Lord of the Death, all of that stuff, okay? Remember also that he tries to get us to do things even though we may not realize exactly what we're doing. Does everybody understand those two things? Okay, that's the largest thing that you need to understand here tonight before we go any further. Let's talk about the rituals of the Celtic pagan religion. Now again, these go all the way back to 300 AD, and the first one here is on the eve of the vigil of Samhain, October 31st, those who worshipped Samhain would wear costumes when they went out to disguise themselves from the evil spirits that were out that night. Remember this for a minute here, and think back. They would wear costumes, because remember that veil is open on the night of October 31st. So they would wear costumes to disguise themselves from familiar spirits. The Bible talks about familiar spirits. So they would disguise themselves and say, boy, so-and-so passed on, and I really, gypped him out of some money or treated him bad, and they might come back for vengeance, or I know an evil spirit or something like that. I'm going to disguise myself so that as these spirits are walking around now in the physical tonight, because the veil is open, I don't want them to recognize me. So they would do this. They would dress themselves up as other people. They would dress themselves up as other things. That's where we get all of this from. Okay? Have you ever wondered where this all comes from? Where all of these rituals that we practice on Halloween come from? It's not an accident. All of these things that we do today all have their roots back to the Celtic religion and the god of Samhain, which was a veiled way to worship Satan.
Amen.
Okay? Now remember, Satan's trying to get you to do things without you not necessarily understanding everything that you're doing, just as long as he gets you to do it. Right? What else do we have? Well, on this night, those who worshipped Samhain would go from house to house and gather sacrifices to offer to the god of Samhain. Right? So they would dress up in these things, they would go from house to house, and they would gather these sacrifices. And that's where we end up getting this whole